Or, yeah, 4th chapter. 5th if you include the prologue. Okay. Top of the 4th. Her mother was moving furniture. That was Trisha's first returning thought. Her second was that Dad had taken her to Good Skates in Lynn, and what she heard was the sound of kids rollerblading past on the old canted track. Then something cold splashed onto the bridge of her nose, and she opened her eyes. Another cold drop of water splashed down dead center on her forehead. Bright light ran across the sky, making her wince and squint. This was followed by a second crash of thunder that startled her into a sideways roll. She pulled instinctively into a fetal position, uttering a croaky little scream as she did so. Then the skies opened. Trisha sat up, grabbing and replacing her baseball cap when it fell off without even thinking about it, gasping like someone who had been tossed rudely into a cold lake. And that was what it felt like. She staggered to her feet. Thunder boomed again, and lightning opened a purple seam in the air. As she stood with rain dripping from the tip of her nose and her hair lying lank against her cheeks, she saw a tall, half-dead spruce on the valley floor below her suddenly explode and fall in 2 flaming pieces. A moment later, the rain was sheeting down so thickly that the valley was only a sketched ghost wrapped in gray gauze. She backed up, getting into the cover of the woods again. She knelt, opened her pack, and got out the blue poncho. She put it on, better late than never, her father would have said, and sat on a fallen tree. Her head was still woozy, and her eyelids were all swollen and itchy. The surrounding woods caught some of the rain, but not all of it. The downpour was too fierce. Trisha flipped up the poncho's hood and listened to the drops tap on it, like rain on the roof of a car. She saw the ever-present cloud of bugs dancing in front of her eyes and waved at them with a strengthless hand. Nothing makes them go away, and they're always hungry. They fed on my eyelids when I passed out, and they'll feed on my dead body, she thought, and began to cry again. This time it was low and dispirited. As she wept, she continued waving at the bugs, cringing each time the thunder roared overhead. I would be scared half out of my mind. I hate thunder. With no watch and no sun, there was no time. All Trisha knew was that she sat there, a small figure in a blue poncho, huddled on a fallen tree, until the thunder began to fade eastward, sounding to her like a vanquished, but still truculent, I don't know if I said that word right, bully. Rain dripped down on her. Mosquitoes hummed, one caught between the inside wall of her poncho's hood and the side of her head. She jabbed a thumb against the outside of the hood, and the hum abruptly stopped. There, she said disconsolately. That takes care of you. Your jam. She started to get up, and her stomach rumbled. She hadn't been hungry before, but she was now. The thought that she had been lost long enough to get hungry was awful in its own way. She wondered how many more awful things were waiting, and was glad she didn't know, couldn't see. Maybe none, she told herself. Hey, girl, get happy. Maybe all the awful things are behind you now. Trisha took off her poncho. Before opening her pack, she looked ruefully down at herself. She was wet from head to toe and covered with pine needles from her faint. Her very first fainting spell. She would have to tell Pepsi, always assuming she ever saw Pepsi again. "Don't start that," she said, and unbuckled the pack flap. She took out the stuff she had brought to eat and drink, laying the items out before her in a neat line. At the side of the paper sack with her lunch in it, her stomach rumbled more fiercely. How late was it? Some deep mental clock attached to her metabolism suggested it might be around 3 in the afternoon. 8 hours since she sat in the breakfast nook, slurping up cornflakes. 5 since she started off on this endless, idiotic shortcut. 3 o'clock, maybe even 4. In her lunch sack was a hard-boiled egg, still in its shell, a tuna fish sandwich, and some celery sticks. There was also the bag of chips, small, the bottle of water, pretty big, the bottle of Surge, the large 20-ounce size, she loved Surge, and the Twinkies. Looking at the bottle of lemon lime soda, Trisha suddenly felt more thirsty than hungry, and mad for sugar. She spun off the cap, brought the bottle to her lips, then paused. It wouldn't be smart to go chugging half of it down, she thought, thirsty or not. She might be out here a while. Part of her mind moaned and tried to draw away from that idea. Just call it ridiculous and draw away. But Trisha couldn't afford to let it. She could think like a kid again once she was out of the woods, but for the time being, she had to think as much like an adult as possible. You saw what's out there, she thought. A big valley with nothing in it except trees. No roads, no smoke. You have to play it smart. You have to conserve your supplies. Mom would tell you the same thing, and so would Dad. She allowed herself 3 big gulps of soda, took the bottle away from her mouth, belched, took another 2 fast swallows. Then she recapped the bottle securely and debated over the rest of her supplies. She decided on the egg. She shelled it, careful to put the pieces of shell back in the baggie the egg had come in. It never occurred to her, then or later, that littering any sign that she'd been there might actually save her life, and sprinkled it with a little twist of salt. Doing that made her sob briefly again, because she could see herself in the Sanford kitchen last night, putting salt on a scrap of wax paper, and then twisting it up the way her mother had shown her. She could see the shadows of her head and hands thrown by the overhead light on the Formica counter. She could hear the sound of the TV news from the living room, could hear creaks as her brother moved around upstairs. This memory had a hallucinogenic clarity that elevated it almost to the status of a vision. She felt like someone who drowns, remembering what it was like to sail on the boat, so calm and at ease, so carelessly safe. Hey, so sorry, this is not going to be very interesting to look at. I guess this will really be just like an audiobook. I am in my car, obviously, waiting for my mom. I took her to a doctor's appointment, and people who are not patients wait outside. So I thought I would take this opportunity to read a little bit. So yeah, sorry again, this view is not very interesting. It's too bad that I didn't bring my fursuit with me so that you could at least see me in fursuit, but I didn't do that. So yeah, sorry, the view's not exactly the best. She was 9 though, 9 going on 10, and big for her age. Hunger was stronger than either memory or fear. She sprinkled the egg with salt and ate it quickly, still sniffling. It was delicious. She could have eaten another easily, maybe 2. Mom called eggs cholesterol bombs. But her mom wasn't here, and cholesterol didn't seem like a very big deal when you were lost in the woods, scratched up and with your eyelids so swollen by bug bites that they felt weighted down with something. Flour paste stuck to the lashes, perhaps. Trisha eyed the Twinkies, then opened the package and ate one of them. Sexual, she said, one of Pepsi's all-time great compliments. She chased everything with a gulp of water. Then, moving quickly before either hand could turn traitor and stuff something else into her mouth, she put the remaining food back in the lunch sack, the top rolled down quite a bit further now, rechecked the seal on her 3/4 full bottle of Surge, and stowed everything in the pack. As she did, her fingers brushed a bulge in the pack's sidewall, and a sudden burst of elation, perhaps partially fueled by fresh calories, lit her up. Her Walkman! She had brought her Walkman! Yeah, baby! She unzipped the inner pocket and lifted it out as reverently as any priest has ever handled the Eucharist. The headphone wire was wrapped around the body of the Walkman, and the tiny earbuds were clipped neatly to the sides of its black plastic body. Her and Pepsi's current favorite tape, Tub Thumper by Chumbawamba, what the heck is that, was in there. But Trisha didn't care about music just then. She slipped the headphones on, nestled the earbuds into place. Spirit, you're so loud. Flipped the switch from tape to radio and turned it on. At first there was nothing but a soft rush of static, because she had been tuned to WMGX, a Portland station. But a little further down the FM band she came to WOXO in Norway, and when she tuned up the other way, she got WCAS, the little station in Castle Rock. Of course, Castle Rock. He sets everything in Castle Rock. A town they had passed through on their way to the Appalachian Trail. She could almost hear her brother, his voice dripping with that newly discovered teenage sarcasm of his, saying something like, WCAS, Hicksville today, tomorrow the world. And it was a Hicksville station, no doubt about that. Whiny cowboy singers like Mark Chestnut and Tracy Adkins alternated with a female announcer who took calls from people who wanted to sell washers, dryers, Buicks, and hunting rifles. Still, it was human contact, voices in the wilderness, and Trisha sat on the fallen tree, transfixed, waving absently at the constant cloud of bugs with her cap. The first time check she heard was 3:09. At 3:30, the female announcer put the community trading post on hold long enough to read the local news. Folks in Castle Rock were up in arms about a bar where they were now topless dancers on Friday and Saturday nights. Folks in Castle Rock were up in arms about a bar where there were now topless dancers on Friday and Saturday nights. There had been a fire at a local nursing home, no one hurt, and Castle Rock Speedway was supposed to reopen on the 4th of July with brand new stands and loads of fireworks. Rainy this afternoon, clearing tonight, sunny tomorrow with highs in the mid-80s. That was it. No missing girl. Trisha didn't know whether to be relieved or worried. She reached to turn off the power and save the batteries, then paused as the female announcer added, "Don't forget that the Boston Red Sox take on those pesky New York Yankees tonight at 7 o'clock. You can catch all the action right here on WCAS, where we've got our socks on." And now back to the shittiest day a little girl ever had, Trisha thought, turning off the radio and wrapping the cord around the slim plastic body again. Yet the truth was that she felt almost all right for the first time since that nasty minnow had started swimming around in her midsection. Having something to eat was partially the reason, but she suspected that the radio had more to do with it. Voices, real human voices, and sounding so close. There was a cluster of mosquitoes on each of her thighs, trying to drill through the material of her jeans. Thank God she hadn't worn shorts. She would have been chuck steak by now. She swatted the mosquitoes away, then got up. What now? Does she know anything at all about being lost in the woods? Well, that the sun rose in the east and went down in the west, that was about all. Once someone had told her that moss grew on the north or south side of a tree, but she couldn't remember which. Maybe the best thing would be just to sit here, try to make some sort of shelter, more against the bugs than the rain. There were mosquitoes inside the hood of her poncho again, and they were driving her crazy, and wait for someone to come. If she had matches, maybe she could make a fire. The rain would keep it from spreading, and someone would see the smoke. Of course, if pigs had wings, bacon would fly, her father had said. Wait a minute, she said. Wait a minute. Something about water. Finding your way out of the woods by water. Now what? It came to her, and she felt another burst of elation. This one was so strong that it made her feel almost giddy. She actually swayed a little on her feet, as one will at the sound of catching music. You found a stream. Mother hadn't told her that. She had read it in one of the little house books a long time ago. Maybe way back when she'd been 7. Yeah, 2 years ago. You found a stream and followed it, and sooner or later it would either lead you out or to a bigger stream. If it was a bigger stream, you followed it until it led you out or to a bigger stream yet. But in the end, running water had to lead you out because it always ran to the sea. And there were no woods there, only the beach and rocks and the occasional lighthouse. And how would she find running water? Why, she would follow the bluff, of course. The one that she'd almost run off the edge of. Stupid Nick that she was. The bluff would lead her in one steady direction, and sooner or later she'd find a brook. The woods were full of them, as the saying went. She re-shouldered her pack, this time putting it on over the poncho, and walked carefully toward the bluff and the fallen ash tree. She now looked back on her panicky plunge through the woods with the mixture of indulgence and embarrassment adults feel when looking back upon the worst of their childhood behavior. But she found she could still not go very close to the edge. It would make her feel sick if she did. She might faint again, or vomit. Vomiting up any of her food when she had so little would be a very bad idea. She turned to the left and began walking through the woods with the drop off to the valley about 20 feet to her right. Every now and then she would force herself to go closer and make sure she wasn't drifting away, that the bluff with its wide view was still there. She listened for voices, but not very hopefully. The trail might be anywhere now, and to stumble on it would be pure dumb luck. What she was listening for was running water, and at last she heard it. Okay, I have no idea if this will work at all, so I'll only read a teeny tiny bit. I figured it was appropriate that I'm in the pet food aisle. I just wanted to give you guys a different look. Try to do this fast, because I feel weird. It won't do me any good if it goes over that stupid cliff in the waterfall, she thought, and decided she had to get close enough to the edge to check out the drop before she reached the stream, if only to guard against disappointment. Sorry about the music. The trees had drawn back a little here, and the space between the edge of the forest and the edge of the drop was dotted with bushes. They would, 4 or 5 weeks later, bear a lush crop of blueberries. Now, however, the berries were just tiny buds, green and inedible. Still, there had to be checkerberries. They were in season, and it might be a good idea to keep that in mind, just in case. Okay, that's all I'm going to attempt. So I'm trying something a little different here. There's way too much wind and stuff to have the original audio, so I'm going to do a voiceover of reading the book. The ground between the blueberry bushes was scaly and shifty with busted rock. The sound under Trisha's sneakers made her think of broken plates. She walked ever more slowly over this scree, and when she was 10 feet or so from the edge of the drop, she got down and crawled. I'm safe. Perfectly safe because I know it's there. Nothing to worry about.
but her heart was still hammering in her chest. And when she got to the edge, she uttered a bewildered little laugh because the drop was hardly there at all anymore. The view across the valley was still wide and sweeping, but wouldn't be for much longer, because the terrain on this side had been sinking. Trisha had been listening so hard and thinking so hard, mostly reminding herself to keep her head, not to go bazonka again, that she hadn't even realized. She worked her way further, pushing through a final little screen of bushes, and looked down. The drop was now only about 20 feet, and no longer sheer. The rock face had become a steep, rubbly slope. Down below were scrubby trees, more fruitless blueberry bushes, tangles of brambles. And scattered everywhere were heaps of broken-up glacial rock. The downpour had stopped, the thunder had retreated to the occasional ill-natured mutter, but it had continued to drizzle, and these heaps of rock had a slick, unpleasant look, like slag from a mine. Trisha backed up and got to her feet, then continued to make her way through the bushes toward the sound of running water. She was starting to feel tired now, her legs aching, but she thought she was basically okay. Afraid, of course, but not so badly as before. They would find her. When people got lost in the woods, they always found them. They sent out planes and helicopters and guys with bloodhounds, and they hunted until the lost person was found. Or maybe I'll kind of save myself. Find a camp in the woods somewhere. Break a window if the door's locked and there's no one home. Use the telephone. Trisha could see herself in some hunter's cabin, which hadn't been used since the previous fall. She could see camp furniture covered with faded paisley dropcloths and a bearskin rug on the board floor. She could smell dust and old stove ashes. This daydream was so clear that she could even smell a trace of ancient coffee. The place was empty, but the telephone worked. It was one of the old-fashioned ones, the handset so heavy that she had to hold it in both hands. But it worked, and she could hear herself saying, "Hello? Mom? This is Trisha. I don't know exactly where I am, but I'm all..." She was so absorbed in the imaginary cabin and the imaginary phone call that she came close to falling into a small stream that emerged from the woods and cascaded down the rubble-strewn slope. Trisha grabbed at the branches of an alder and stood looking at the stream, actually smiling a little. It had been a crappy day, all right. Très crappy. But her luck finally seemed to be turning, and that was a big hooray. She walked to the edge of the slope. The stream spilled down in a foamy rush, here and there striking a bigger rock and kicking up spray that would have held rainbows on a sunny afternoon. The slope on both sides of the water looked slippery and unreliable. All that loose, wet rock. Still, it was also dotted with bushes. If she started to slide, she would grab one of those as she'd grab the alder at the edge of the stream. "Water leads to people," she said, and started down the slope. She descended sideways, in little hops, on the right side of the stream. At first she was all right, even though the angle of the slope was steeper than it had looked from up above, and the broken ground shifted under her sneakers every time she moved. Her pack, of which she had hardly been aware up until now, began to feel like a large, unstable baby in one of those papoose carriers. Every time it shifted, she had to wave her arms to keep her balance. She was all right, though, and a darn good thing, because when she paused halfway down the slope, her propping right foot actually buried in loose rock below her, she realized she couldn't climb back up anymore. One way or the other, she was bound for the valley floor. She got moving again. 3/4 of the way down, a bug, a big one, not a midge or a mosquito, flew into her face. It was a wasp, and Trisha batted at it with a cry. Her pack shifted violently to her downhill side. Her right foot slipped, and suddenly her balance was gone. She fell, hit the rock slope on her shoulder with a tooth-rattling thud, and began to slide. "Oh, shit on toast!" she cried, and grabbed at the ground. All she got was a strew of loose rock that slid along with her, and a sharp jab of pain as a broken chunk of quartz cut her palm. She snatched at a bush, and it came out by its stupid shallow roots. Her foot struck something. Her right leg bent at a painful angle, and she was suddenly airborne, the world revolving as she did an unplanned somersault. Trisha came down on her back and slid that way, legs spread, arms waving, screaming in pain and terror and surprise. Her poncho and the back of her shirt pulled up to her shoulder blades. Sharp pieces of rock tore snatches of skin from between them. She tried to break with her feet. The left one struck a jutting outcrop of shale and turned her to the right. That put her into a roll, first on her stomach, and then onto her back, and then onto her stomach again, the pack digging into her, then pitching upward each time she went over. The sky was down, the hateful broken scree of the slope was up, and then they swapped places. Swing your partner with a do-si-do, everybody change. Trisha went the final 10 yards on her left side with her left arm stretched out and her face buried against the fold of her elbow. She thumped against something hard enough to bruise her ribs on that side. And then, before she could even look up from her arm, a needle of pain drove into her just above her left cheekbone. Trisha shrieked and jerked to her knees, slapping. She crushed something, another wasp, of course, what else? Even as it stung her again, even as she opened her eyes and saw them all around her. Yellow-brown insects that looked weighted down in the tail section, plump, ungainly poison factories. She had slid into a dead tree, standing at the foot of the slope about 25 feet from the brawling streamlet. In the dead tree's lowest fork, just at eye level to a little girl who was 9 but tall for her age, was a gray paper nest. Agitated wasps were crawling all over it. More were flying out of a hole in the top. Pain needled the right side of Trisha's neck, just below the bill of her cap. Another sting lit up her right arm above the elbow. Screaming, in a total panic, she bolted. Something stung the back of her neck. Something stung in the small of her back, above the waistband of her blue jeans, where her shirt was still pulled up and the plastic poncho, hung in tatters. She ran in the direction of the stream without any thought or plan or intent. It was just that the ground there was relatively open. She wove her way around the clumps of bushes, and when the underbrush began to thicken, she bowled through it. At the stream she stopped, gasping for breath, looked tearfully and fearfully back over her shoulder. The wasps were gone, but they had done plenty of damage before she had managed to outrun them. Her left eye, close to where the first one had gotten her, was swelled almost shut. If I get a bad reaction, I'll die, she thought, but in the aftermath of her panic, she didn't care. She sat down by the little stream which had gotten her into all this trouble, sobbing and sniffling. When she felt a little bit in control of herself again, she took off her pack. Tight, fierce shudders racked her, each one making her body harden up like a spring and pulling red-hot darts of pain from the places where she had been stung. She put her arms around her pack, rocked it like a doll, and cried harder. Holding the pack that way made her think of Mona lying in the back seat of the caravan. Good old Moni Baloney, with her big blue eyes. There had been times when her parents were getting ready to divorce, and then actually doing it, when Mona had felt like her only comfort. There were times when not even Pepsi could understand. Now her parents' divorce seemed like very small beans. There were bigger problems than grown-ups who couldn't get along. There were wasps, for one thing, and Trisha thought she would give anything to see Mona again. At least she wasn't going to die from the stings, or she'd probably be dying already. She had overheard her mom and Mrs. Thomas from across the street talking about someone who was allergic to stings, and Mrs. Thomas had said, 10 seconds after it got him, poor old Frank was swole up like a balloon. If he hadn't had his little kit with the hypodermic, I guess he would have choked to death. Trisha didn't feel choky, but the bites throbbed horribly, and they had swole up like balloons, all right. The one by her eye had built a hot little volcano of tissue that she could actually look at, and when she probed gingerly with her fingers, a bolt of pain shot into her head and made her cry out in misery. She was no longer exactly weeping, but that eye ran helplessly with tears just the same. Moving her hands slowly and carefully, Trisha examined herself. She isolated at least half a dozen stings. She thought there was one location on her left side just above the hip where she might have sustained 2 or even 3. It was the sorest place of all. Okay, I'm going to stop here and I'll let you enjoy the sounds of the train. I hope you liked this. I'll see you in the next one. Love you. Bye.